some random thoughts about Thomas Pynchon. And as I make my way through my fourth Pynchon book in a row, I think I'm saying that correctly, these are some of the longest novels ever written. I went from Gravity's Rainbow to Against the Day to Mason-Dixon. I like doing studies, whether it's music or books. I like to binge out on one artist. And when it comes to the main artists I listen to jazz-wise, I have no problem listening to the main 10, like Mingus, Train, Miles Davis, oh my gosh, the bass player, Dave Holland, huge Dave Holland fan. I have no problem just listening to the masters. I don't need to hear local acts and all that kind of stuff because I make my own music. That's where I get that from. I'm not I have a vast collection of books and records, movies, but they are all kind of the same. They're all kind of like the same artists. And so I'm doing this Pynchon binge where I've been spending a lot of time. It's challenging. And just like any other artist that's in pop culture that's challenging, I suspected something. When I was getting ready to read Pynchon, I had investigated a little bit his history and the critics. And I thought about something. I wanted to do a little talk here, I only have 10 minutes, where I want to point out how any artist who is in the pop culture aura, critics are always going to say something bad about them. Anytime you have someone that presents something challenging, this is a mandatory thing, and you're going to have critics that make it seem like they're irrelevant, and you're going to have critics that like them, pretend to like them, but can't wait to say that they've lost their way, or that the work they just did was lesser than their previous work. And so as I moved on out of the long-form Pynchon novels into the shorter ones that I already understand are written more conventionally, I see a great example of this. The first example that really stood out for me of a critic saying someone was irrelevant was Thelonious Monk. When he released his album Underground, there was a famous critic at that point calling him irrelevant. He'd been around for a while. This is now his Columbia years, which arguably are his best recordings, with Charlie Rouse, great band. And again, there's nothing wrong with Monk's album. There's nothing wrong with Monk. It's just a critic taking advantage of an experimental, challenging artist that has been around for 20 years or more and using it to criticize, to drum up something that makes no sense. This is my impression with Pynchon's critics. From what I understand, Against the Day and Bleeding Edge are considered lesser Pynchon. I don't agree with that at all. I think Against the Day was epic, top-notch Pynchon, and I haven't seen any reduction. So as I am about 1/3 of the way through Bleeding Edge, all I'm seeing is an author not wanting to stick himself into a caricature of his own self. And I see him just writing a story in a conventional sense, which still has all of his comedic gems and wild prose stuck in there. But yeah, this is a conventional novel, and it almost seems like he was... I don't know if he was a Paul Auster fan, but this reminds me of a Paul Auster book. And it almost seems like he could have been writing this. I'm entertaining this thought to remind critics as well as readers that it's okay to use regular person dialogue. Okay, Paul Auster is another person that was accused of using B-movie dialogue. I've read everything he's ever written. I've only detected something that could be confused as B-movie dialogue 3 times. One was in the book Brooklyn Follies, another one was in a book called Music of Chance, and then Sunset Park, or whatever that book was called. And this dialogue, whenever someone says B-movie dialogue, again, that's a critic making up illusory terms to try to be critical. You know, Paul Auster has gone on record saying that he'll spend an entire day on one page. Even if he feels like, you know, you're getting this stream of consciousness, these ideas, he will only allow himself a maximum of 1 page a day. He said he studies every sentence, and you can tell. I mean, if you look at his early works, I still didn't quite get New York Stories. I mean, it was very complex. I still didn't quite get it. It was kind of like reading, what's that Nabokov book, Pale Fire. Honestly, I didn't quite get that book. But, you know, I'll admit to it. So Auster never wrote B-movie dialogue. Again, it was a critic taking an original style like Auster, and this famous critic, trashed Auster, saying that he has a predictable formula, and he gave an example of a mock Auster story, and it was completely false. And so Auster who passed away recently, R.I.P., has been another one of those artists who has had a succubus critic attached to them, and it's damaged their legacy. You know, because there was a time period when I was reading all of Auster's stuff where I searched through critics, and you could see people, even on Amazon, referencing that article of that critic who made it seem like Auster's always doing the same thing about making stories about chance. No, he's not. He's just like Thelonious Monk, just like Thomas Pynchon, where they're fine-tuning their craft. Now, so what's going on here with this recent complete switch in style with the bleeding edge, I'm enjoying it. You know, I mean, do I like it as much as the experimental stream of consciousness stuff? No, I don't. But I'm not going to, for a second, say it's less than. Okay, now something I wanted to talk about real quick in my last couple minutes is Mason and Dixon. Book's incredible. I've already pointed out that there was direct references to English literature, more specifically modern English literature, Patrick O'Brian, up to a character named O'Brien who writes sea stories. I already talked about that. But I noticed an even closer influence, on another direct influence in Mason and Dixon. It was actually Charles Dickens. And there couldn't be a clearer nod towards Dickens than Pynchon's female characters, especially the way he, animated Martha Washington, sitting around smoking weed with George Washington and the way those characters jump off the page. Now, Mason Dixon was actually a nod to a specific Dickens novel, which is Martin Chuzzlewit. Martin Chuzzlewit was the first Dickens novel I ever read. It's probably his most funniest. I don't know, I haven't read all of Dickens. I've read a lot of Dickens. And it also got him into some hot water in America because he split the book into different sections, and one section was called America. Is where a prospector, a young up-and-coming guy wants to start life for this romantic interest that he wants to provide for. He goes over to America, and it's hilarious. Like the way Dickens describes it, a bunch of hillbillies in a underdeveloped swamp marsh. It's extremely controversial because Dickens is ripping on America, and he fell out with America for a while. Everything ended up being okay, but this book kind of went underneath the surface. Even the BBC, I watched the BBC version of it, won't even touch that scene. They make it like 5 minutes. Nobody will touch that. So back to Pynchon, that he's specifically nodding towards Dickens and Martin Chuzzlewit by dividing the book into the America section. Highly recommend Martin Chuzzlewit if you're a Pynchon fan.